Good morning, everyone. This is John Shaw, the director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute at Southern Illinois University. Thank you for joining a special conversation we're going to have this morning, which I'm really looking forward to. We're going to be chatting with Bob Eschbach, who is the former mayor of Ottawa, Illinois, and also the recipient of the 2024 Simon-Edgar Award for statesmanship in state and local government in Illinois. And Governor Edgar and I are about to launch the search for the 2025 recipient of the award, and thought it'd be a good way to kind of frame our quest by having a conversation with Bob, who in many ways exemplifies exactly the sort of leader we're looking for when we established this award 5 years ago. Let me tell you a little bit about Bob. He is a native of Ottawa, Illinois, went to Illinois Valley College, and then he graduated from ISU, has a law degree from University of Illinois in Champaign. And then he came back to Ottawa and just did some amazing work in the law field, as a volunteer. He sat on a number of boards, planning, zoning, historic preservation. Was elected mayor in 1999 and had a remarkable 20-year run as mayor. People talk about just the kind of stunning revitalization of the city with a comprehensive plan, economic development, beautification, riverfront development, festivals, just this wonderful sense of kind of common enterprise in the community of Ottawa. So we're eager to talk to Bob about how he a little bit about his background, but how he, working with his community, put the pieces together and made Ottawa such a really kind of remarkable and stirring success story. So Bob, good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Thank you. Well, Bob, talk about just kind of the early days. Were your folks from Ottawa? Talk a little bit about growing up in and around Ottawa.
Sure. Yeah, I was born in Ottawa, raised in Ottawa, except for going to college and law school and so forth. I pretty much have been here. Really enjoyed it. I had a great childhood. My mom just passed away about 6 months ago, and I was reflecting with my siblings that we couldn't think of any trauma in our childhood. It was mostly because of her, but it also was partly because of Ottawa. It was an easy place to live. It still is. So anyway, I always had an interest in government. I went to ISU. I majored in political science. After that, what do? You go to law school. I did that. I became a small town lawyer, which I've really enjoyed. I think this is going to be my last year. I've been at it since 1978. When I came back after law school, I was pretty involved in the local affairs. At the time, there was a company out of Texas that wanted to put a hazardous waste dump at the edge of town. At the time, the technology was basically dig a hole and fill it. And we organized an opposition to that, and we got the county board to get involved, and it was in the courts for years, but they finally went away. And in that process, I got to develop a lot of good relationships with local folks and people of similar mindset, and went on to do some government things. I was on the plan commission for 8 years before I became mayor, and that was kind of one of the reasons I ran for mayor, is because even though the city had a plan commission since the 1940s, they never adopted a plan. So we were kind of planning by the seat of our pants when somebody came in and wanted to do a development or tear something down or whatever the case might be, and sort of begged the mayor to let us do a plan. And they thought it was a waste of money. Those plans just sit on shelves. And so when I was elected, that's one of the first things we did that really, I think, got us off to a good start.
Well, Bob, I want to just maybe slow down for a sec. And just in terms of what, you're working both as a volunteer and then sitting on some of these boards, historic preservation, the planning board, and so forth. I mean, what sort of lessons were you learning as these experiences unfolded? I mean, did you feel like you were getting a sense of both kind of the granular nature of how government works, and also were you forging, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but kind of a vision of what Ottawa could be? I mean, how did these tangible experiences shape your future approach to public service?
Well, one of the first things that we did when I became mayor, and at that time, there was kind of a change in leadership in the community. The former mayor decided not to run again, and we have a commission form of government. There's one mayor, 4 commissioners. We all have 1 vote. We're all up for election at the same time. And at that time, there were 20 people running for 5 seats, 4 for mayor and 16 for commissioner. And the newly elected council was all new except for one guy. And actually, the incumbent who was reelected was the youngest guy in the old council and the oldest guy in the new council. So we had kind of a generational change. But one of the things that we as a council decided to do is get all of those people who ran for office involved in government. And every one of them except one agreed to be on a board or a commission or a committee. And we got people involved. And to get to your question, though, once you have these people involved, you want to kind of develop a common vision. And I always say Ottawa had a terrible inferiority complex at the time. The town in the 60s lost a couple thousand factory jobs at the local glass plant that made windshields at the time for General Motors. And so, you know, I saw the town decline. I saw the downtown decline. We had 60% empty storefronts. And so, but we still had good bones, and we have a great location, and there's incredible history. And so we wanted to build on that and share that, or try to develop that vision. So it wasn't just the crazy mayor's idea, but that it was everybody's idea. And we did some really extensive planning at that point, getting the community involved, multiple meetings with often over 100 people showing up, divided in groups, talking about the town, what's good about it, what's bad about it, what can be improved, what do we want to preserve, and coming to some conclusions and incorporating that into a guiding document or comprehensive plan, first one ever in the city. And from that point on, I think that kind of set the mood. People felt they were involved, they had a say, and it was easier to kind of make the advances that we made when it was like, hey, this is part of our plan, And even though many people thought it was pie in the sky, it's like, that's what a plan's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be what's most affordable or whatever. It's what the vision is, and then as opportunities arise, you can develop some of those ideas and visions.
Well, and I want to draw down a little bit on planning, because I was reading a biography of Dwight Eisenhower, who once said, "Plans are useless. Planning is everything." And I think what he meant by that was just the whole process of bringing people together, trying to think through in kind of a strategic, careful way, is really what effective government is all about. So maybe about that, but also just even the notion of a plan, because sometimes, strategic plans, in whatever institution, tend to be sort of vague and platitudinous and so forth. And so, I mean, I'm intrigued by the notion of plans that actually bring people together and accomplish things. So, any reflections on that would be interesting to me.
Yeah, well, I learned real quickly that plans don't just sit on a shelf. And I remember one of a potential development, industrial development that did end up coming to Ottawa. At one of our initial meetings, we talked about plans, and I had said that, well, we've got a comprehensive plan. He goes, we know, we've studied it. And I said, well, we just developed that a year or two ago. I said, well, he said, if you didn't have a plan, we wouldn't be here. If you don't know what you want to be, we're not going to come and try to tell you or try to figure out how we're supposed to fit in. And so right away, I thought that, it can sit on the shelf if you want it to, but it's really a living document. And, every 5 years or so, you go back to it and do some revisions and so forth. But I think in the process, I'm a very strong proponent of due process and community involvement, and that I see where Eisenhower was coming. When he said it's the planning, the process that's important, because that's when you make big plans, as Burnham said. I always quote him, and get people excited about the possibilities, and then getting them involved in all these committees and commissions further kind of amplified that, I think, and helped us to be able to move forward.
Bob, in one of your, I think it was one of your State of the City talks, you said something that plays to just kind of this community involvement. You say the best way to get people to understand government and maybe some of the problems and challenges is to get them involved. And in that first year, a lot of people got involved, hundreds. And I think that's an important point, because sometimes, people have, discontents about government and anger and frustrations, but there's something about actually being at the ground floor and just seeing how you put pieces together and make things work that is very educational to people. I mean, when you're out in the bleachers, it's pretty easy to take shots at folks, but when you're at, at the ground floor, you get a much better sense of just the complexity of raising funds and meeting zoning requirements and so forth. So speak to that if you could.
Yeah, well, I mean, it teaches people about government. I always quote the Alexis de Tocqueville when he talked about when he came to America in the 1840s and, did this treatise on democracy in America. He said that, you know, local government, at that time, it was more like town meetings or whatever. He said town meetings are to liberty what grammar schools are to science. That's where we begin to learn how to work it and appreciate it. And a lot of people have never been on a committee before. They didn't know you had to take turns to speak. They didn't know what an agenda was. And this whole process got people involved and in a small way, and then sometimes in larger ways. They would become members of the plan commission, or they would run for office. And as you say, it's easy to criticize if you don't know what's going on. But my view was always to get them involved. For 20 years, I gave these speeches in the park every Memorial Day or Veterans Day about, we have each other. That's more important. We don't have a dictator, whatever. And we have to work together and make it work. And I think by having that attitude and people buying into it pretty quickly made a big difference.
Well, when you ran in 1999, what was did you have like an overall theme, or what was your message that you took to kind of
Well, a couple things were, open and honest government and involvement, some of the things we've just been talking about. I had some, general concepts. I really pushed the downtown revitalization concept. At the time, as I said, most of our storefronts were empty. We had one block where JCPenney, Sears, Montgomery Ward, Carson Perry Scott, Woolworths, and some local department store all closed, within a matter of years. I mean, it was nothing. And we basically, the city started to do things downtown. We put in historic street lights, and all of a sudden we had a few more stores, and we started doing some landscaping, and all of a sudden a few more stores, and we got to the point now where we rarely have an empty storefront on our main LaSalle Street. It's about 3 blocks long. Not sure what the question was now that I got it wrong.
Well, no, it was just your campaign as mayor, and just your notion was economic development was kind of at the cornerstone of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't have all the nice things without the economic development, and that's where that's the source of revenue. But I did push, like I said, downtown development. I had these crazy commercials where Petula Clark would be singing downtown, or we talked about a lot of our schools were kind of isolated, didn't even have sidewalks to go to them, and did a commercial with Cat Stevens, "Where Do the Children Play?" in the background, and I had fun with it. But I think I was kind of trying to just connect with people to make them realize that Ottawa had a lot of potential, and we needed to get over that inferiority complex and be positive. And when things started happening, more and more people bought into it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a bit about economic development, because I know that one of the things that you have said as you reflect on your time as mayor was the importance of what you called non-city revenues. And I think you mentioned at one point that over the 20 years you were mayor, Ottawa got grants of something like 55 million. I think a lot of it was for disaster mitigation related to flooding. But talk about just getting these grants, and also without getting too deep in the weeds, I mean, some of these concepts of municipal government in terms of tax increment financing and enterprise zones. I mean, just kind of broadly, I mean, how do you assemble an economic development strategy, and then how do you track down those grant opportunities that can help just really launch your community?
Yeah, well, we took advantage of the TIF Act. I think we had 6 or 7 TIF districts in the community, and I think if you know how to use them, they can be very helpful. Getting new business to communities is competitive. You're competing against other states very often. They know that. They set you up for competition. You've got to be able to offer something. And of course, with TIFs, the only money that you're offered is money that they bring in the form of real estate tax revenue to the community. So it's not like we're dipping into a general fund. And that, and combined with, I should obviously say, a good staff. I had some great people working with me. We were able to attract a lot of grants and kind of piggyback them with the TIF project, where the state would step in, Department of Transportation, and do some of the infrastructure leading to a new facility. And the enterprise zone, that we're in the enterprise zone also, which is another uh, tax benefit as far as developers not having to pay sales tax on their building materials. So we were able to put together some pretty good packages, attractive packages, and we did land some significant new employers. I think we figured out we've several thousand new jobs, over the course of 20 years that are still here, which is good. And I think people, there's a lot of criticism of TIF districts, but in most cases, I don't think people understand them. And we would work with the local taxing bodies. We would refund a portion of the increment so that they were getting something. We always tell them the percentage of something is better than 100% of nothing, which is what would happen if you don't have the TIFs. And developed pretty good relationships with a lot of the taxing bodies, and really didn't have that difficult a time creating and implementing our TIFs.
Well, let's talk for a second about the flooding problem, because as I understand, Ottawa is at the confluence of two rivers, and there've been some really difficult flooding over the years. And I understand you guys came up with this really, really impressive, nationally recognized flood plain plan. Talk a little bit about, what the problem was and what solution you've come up with.
Well, the problem is have low elevations near a river. And we had a whole neighborhood, probably 100 homes or so, that was on the Fox River, just half mile up from where it empties into the Illinois River. So every time there was a major flood, that would flood out. IEMA would be here. They would offer a flood buyout. There's a flood buyout program that we took part in, and after the flood, maybe 10 people would say, "All right, I'm going to, take the money, sell the house." Then we would demo the house, and we become part of a park. And every major flood, that kind of went a little bit further, to the point where we pretty much and it started before I was mayor, but probably over 25 years or so, we were able to acquire all of those properties. It's now a beautiful park. If it floods, it's no big deal. And we're sort of the poster child. We became sort of the poster child of IEMA, because they said, whenever there's a major flood, we used to all have to go to Ottawa. Now Ottawa's not even on our map anymore. And it worked out real well. And then we had a great floodplain manager. Actually, our city engineer also served as floodplain manager. And we were able to come up with programs where we were helping people to buy out. Sometimes we would supplement the amount that the flood buyout program would pay in order to get the properties. And then we adopted some pretty important restrictions and regulations on developing in floodplains in general, so we didn't have these problems in the future. So if we wanted people to know that if they were building in a low elevation area, these are the risks, and these are the requirements that you do to make your project more flood resistant.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about just beautification. And I saw one citation. I think it was with the American Bloom program. You won a special award, and they talked about the most dramatic transformation of a downtown streetscape. I know you've talked a little bit about, filling empty buildings. Talk about some of the other things, because I saw some photographs of before and after, and it's just a startling transformation of the physical look of Ottawa.
Yeah, and that I'll start by saying that also had a lot to do with our volunteers. We had a lot of volunteers who bought into the concepts and put their hearts and souls into planting. But it's curb appeal. It's the first thing people see when they come to a community. And so many people now in our businesses are from out of town. They're visitors. They're repeat visitors often. And I think we were able to create an atmosphere that wasn't just all asphalt. At one time, if you look down the South Street, the main street through Ottawa, downtown Ottawa, was just concrete and asphalt. There was nothing. And it's amazing what you can do by cutting out concrete and planting trees and shrubs and perennials. And it I think set the tone. It showed that people care about those things. And so the more we started a block at a time. We didn't borrow, we just did this with the downtown TIF money. And we had some good plans. And it kind of took off on its own. And to this day, the original trees we planted on LaSalle Street, almost every one of them has survived. They're nice big trees now providing shade and a real nice atmosphere versus that concrete jungle that we had to begin with. And the stores, the stores filled up. Retail is tough for everybody, but we have very few vacancies downtown, and we've got great restaurants. I have mayors from other communities around here saying, "Oh yeah, we come to Ottawa once a week, whatever, to get a good meal." And I think it just happened. It's incremental, but one little thing leads to another, and that's kind of what happened. And people judge a community by its downtown. If you go into some other town, what does it look like downtown? Everybody's got residential neighborhoods and industrial areas, but it's the downtown that kind of, I think, defines the city. And in Ottawa, in order to get anywhere, you'll have to go down through downtown. So it really had an impact on the local folks and on the visitors, I think.
I read one comment you made where maybe a consultant had told you that, for communities like Ottawa, you need to at least have, 8 really good, vibrant restaurants to just give a kind of a nice buzz. I mean, that may have been an arbitrary number, but the point is, places that are interesting and compelling and have good food.
Yeah. And when he said that, I thought, oh my God, we'll never get to that stage, but we did. And he was right. When I tell them to come to Ottawa for dinner, I don't say you have to go here, here, here. I say, just come to Ottawa. There's a dozen places, within walking distance that you can choose and enjoy, and they're all different, unique. And there's not one chain, well, except for maybe a Jimmy John's or something. There's not one chain in the downtown area. In fact, I had somebody come from a chain one time because I had a commissioner who was insistent that we get I forget what it was called, some sort of Scottish brand restaurant, and we had lunch at one of our downtown restaurants. He goes, "Why do you want us? Look at this. This is great food. It's done by local folks, and the atmosphere, the design of the building, everything is fine. Now, why do you want us?" And that was my point. We really don't.
May have to hire him as a statesman, huh? That's a pretty broad view. Well, Bob, let's talk a little bit about just festivals too. I mean, a part of developing this sense of community and common purpose is, I understand you have just a really vibrant festival arrangement. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, we try to put together a pretty good collection of festivals, building from what we already had. But we did some pretty amazing things. We developed, believe it or not, a mushroom festival. People would go out and we had the Mushroom University would take them out into the woods and they would learn how to hunt mushrooms. And we'd have a mushroom contest, who got the biggest one, who got the most or whatever. We'd have a mushroom auction. And these mushrooms, they bring in $80 a pound or something for some of them. It seems kind of odd, but it was very successful. And then we paired that with local brew clubs, beer makers from cities around the state that would come and just compete with their homemade beers. I was a beer judge, by the way. That was one of my jobs.
One of the perks, huh?
Yeah. But then we developed some more sophisticated projects where we partnered with the Illinois Vintners Association and did a wine jazz fest, and that lasted 3 or 4 years, where we'd bring in this huge tent, kind of like a circus tent, rather than having these little tents, and everybody was underneath it. And I developed because I was the mayor and walking the crowd, I'd meet people, and then 2 years from all over the suburbs, and they would come back and they'd yell out, "Hey, mayor!" And I'd go talk. "Oh yeah, you were here last year," and it became an attraction from people out of town. And so I think that's the ideal festival, a festival that's good for the local folks, but really a lot of times just the local people can't support those bigger, more expensive festivals. So if you can attract the Chicago and suburbanites and Springfield and Bloomington folks, then it works. And that was pretty much volunteers doing most of the work.
Well, let's talk about some hard decisions too. And I know they're not always of global impact, but I know there was a couple that you took that you're thinking, okay, this may not end well for me politically. I think there's one story, maybe you were out with maybe on a boat ride with a fellow commissioner, and you said, "Man, if we do this, we may lose our jobs." And then you said, "But so what? We're here to do things. Let's."
It was just a minor thing. We were going to enact an ordinance that prevented the burning of leaves in the community. We had a lot of people with asthma. We had a lot of complaints and so forth. And yeah, I was with another commissioner or 2 commissioners, and one and I were pretty much for this, and the other guy said, if we do this, we're not going to get reelected. And I and the other commissioner at the same time said, so what? It's the right thing to do. So well, people will figure it out. But if we don't get elected, we don't get elected. I mean, that's not the end of the world. And I think it's important to kind of have that attitude. It worked for me.
Well, let's talk about your decision to leave in 2019. I mean, it was a 20-year run. Was it just kind of instinctive feeling that you had had a really good run and it was time to pass the baton, or what was what
Sort of, yeah. The record in Ottawa was 20 years, and everybody wanted me to beat the record and do 4 more. And I was 67. I'm still practicing law. I think I mentioned. I think this is my last year, and I thought it was a good time to move on. And that was really it. Probably was a good decision because a year later COVID hit, and it was a really pretty rough 4 years. The 4 years after I left, but I thought that the town was it didn't need me to continue to prosper or whatever, and I think that's proven to be the case. There's a certain energy now. There's a certain we've got to a certain point where we're not fighting to bring people downtown. Now, in the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of buildings have been purchased by young folks. They're rehabbing the second floor. Sometimes these second floors have been empty for 40, 50 years, and they're putting in apartments and Airbnb type things. And it's happening. It's at the point now where just what's there is causing it to continue and to continue to grow. And so it's all pretty good news. And I'm not involved. It just happens.
Well, in evaluating your legacy, one of I think it was the gentleman who headed the Chamber of Commerce, called you, quote, the greatest closer in the world. How, what's the art of being a closer?
I don't know if that's true, but what I think he was referring to is I had really great staff people, and the chamber director would do a lot of the groundwork in getting companies to come to Ottawa and take a look. And so when it was time for them to make the decision, that's when I got more involved. And although I was keeping track all along, but and I was just very positive, and this is what we can do. This is the right decision. And it came down to also the fact that you got to the point where you could brag about your town. And not only do we have all the things you need for to build your building and the employees or whatever, but we got a place where you or your workers would probably want to live. It's pretty nice here in Ottawa. And so I give my little spiel, and seemed to work.
Well, the chief engineer, Mr. Noble, said the mayor had a vision of what he wanted the city to become, and he clearly articulated that vision, encouraged people to adapt to that. And that vision is contagious and excited people and makes them want to be here. So I guess that connects with just this whole notion of a plan too, if people know where you want to take them and take the community, and you explain it to them, that's a big part of the job of a leader, isn't it?
Yeah, you have to inspire people, and every year I did a state of the city address, and a couple hundred people would show up for a luncheon or whatever. And I tried to, share the vision. Toward the end, I was doing a lot of before and after pictures, because people, when we'd show pictures of LaSalle Street, 15 or 20 years ago, and LaSalle Street then, the asphalt jungle to this beautiful, fairly lush greenscape, there were actually gasps in the audience because people either weren't here back in those days or forgot how bad it was. Because when you see it every day, you don't really realize sometimes that this looks pretty grim, and that also helped a lot in getting the vision out there and being more than just the mayor's vision.
Right. Well, let's talk about your life since you've stepped down. And I know you're exceptionally busy. I mean, we have good mutual friends, Ray LaHood and Jim Nolan, who are involved in some projects with you. I talk a little bit about that. I mean, one of them I know is this a connector project, the Canal Connector. Talk a little bit about that. And I know also you were the chairman for a bit of the Starved Rock County
Country community.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, still, I would say a third of my time is not in the law office. It's going to meetings and being involved in not-for-profits. And I was one of the founding members of the Starbuck Country Community Foundation. We were one of the few counties, there was actually a 3-county area that wasn't served by a community foundation. I didn't know what it was. Nobody else did, but we had a couple of people who did some real legwork on learning about it. And so we developed a foundation. About $7 million has run through it in the last 10 years. We've got $3 million or so in donor advised funds or scholarship funds or whatever that the foundation handles. We're able to step in and administer grants. We administered some of the COVID related grants, and it's turned out to be really good for the community. Millions of dollars that have gone through there and actually been distributed not for profits throughout the community. And right now, what I'm involved in is the Canal Trail Connector. We have the Illinois Michigan Canal, which runs through Ottawa and goes to LaSalle. And 50 miles away, we have the Hennepin Canal and Trail, which goes to the Mississippi River. And it's, basically crosses the state of Illinois, but there's a 15-mile gap in between. The canals will never be connected, but we're trying to connect the trail. That's where I got to meet Ray LaHood, very inspirational guy. And of course, Jim that you mentioned. And the other one that I'm really working on now is, besides being on some local boards for our museum and Mansion Foundation and so forth, that we've developed in the last 2 years a Ottawa Center for the Arts, and we've just taken possession of a 1870s church with a auditorium that'll seat 450 people. It's incredible acoustics. It has one of the finest organs in the state of Illinois, and the idea is to use that as a concert center and also just the arts in general. It was gifted to us. We've been lucky to get quite a few substantial donations, so we're off to a good start. Actually, looking at a second building also, but and it's amazing the talent we have in Ottawa. We have some great people on the board from all walks of life, including music and the arts, but also people know a little bit about raising money and whatever. And I used to hate asking for money, but I actually get pretty good at it now. It's amazing how much money there is out there. There's a lot of people who are getting older. As a lawyer, I see this. They'll come in, and a lot of them don't have kids, or they don't like their kids. And I've had several that say they love Ottawa. A couple came in a few months ago that moved here 6 or 7 years ago, and they want to leave all of their estate to good causes in Ottawa. So it's important to be able to tap into that. I learned some of this from being on the foundation too, but you need funds.
Well, Bob, as you kind of look back on your career, and I know you're an extraordinarily modest person, but what is, what distinguishes a solid mayor from a good mayor to a really excellent one? I mean, what is the kind of secret sauce that makes someone particularly effective, as opposed to just well-meaning, well-intentioned, but just not quite able to deliver tangibly?
Yeah, it's you have to be a good communicator, I think. You have to be connected to the population. It's not things just don't happen at City Hall. I always tried to develop consensus. I had a commissioner who kept saying it only takes 3 votes. We've got 3 votes. I go, I don't want 3 votes. I want 5 votes. And usually, a lot of times, if I only had 3 votes, it wasn't that good of a project. But in most cases, we were developing consensus, and it's a lot of communication with the commissioners. I was writing memos all the time. I don't know if they ever read them, but as to what was going on in the background and ideas that we had and so forth, to kind of get them involved and buying into some project. And then all the ideas weren't mine either. I mean, they all had great ideas that we would follow up on. But I think you have to be communicating. Obviously, you have to listen, and then you do have to have some positivity. You got to get over the inferiority complex, and then when things happen, just keep them going. As I said, things are incremental. One thing leads to another, and that was part of the downtown or the beautification projects. Nobody ever planted hardly planted trees, and we started planting them. You see more and more of them in the neighborhoods where people are planting trees, and nobody mulched trees, and then we started mulching them. And you see that in the neighborhoods. So it's kind of contagious. But I think, I don't know if, and I think having and in my case, my legal background helped, because I had talked to former mayors, and often they would say, "Well, don't do that, you'll get sued." And I go, "Get sued?" It's pretty hard to sue a city, first of all. But if you've got a good idea, you can't let that kind of thing scare you. Don't put in a skate park because somebody might get hurt and you'll get sued. We got over that pretty quick.
Right. Well, one of my colleagues suggested I ask you how the Simon-Edgar Award has changed your life. I hope the reporters are not, staking you out relentlessly and so forth. But more seriously, I mean, I hope it. I know it's in people who've responded to me about the award, they found that your work is inspiring, is really kind of, particularly at a time when the national political scene is contentious. We'll say that. And people are wondering if government can work at any level, to see that someone was able to bring together a community and really pull it together.
It can work. It does work. And I often think that I don't think anybody should be in Washington unless they've been mayor for a while. I've talked to a state senator who said that she had never experienced anything as heated and contentious in all of her years in the legislature as she had when she was a plan commissioner in her town, and somebody was coming in wanting to do a development or change something in the neighborhood or whatever. And so you're really close to the people there, and you really, I think, learn a lot. I never wanted to do anything beyond being mayor. It's so easy, when you're in a smaller town, you don't have to. There's name recognition, all that stuff is there. You don't have to worry about that and spend your whole life campaigning. But it works. You just gotta get involved, and you can't think of city services as a business. You can't think of the city as a business where you collect money and taxes and you provide the services, or union. And you got to, or government. You got to be involved to make it work, in particular in our democratic system. And that's why I keep telling people we have each other. We don't have a king, or I hope we don't have a king or a dictator or an oligarch or a religious leader. We have each other, and we got to work together. I was always quoting Lincoln, of the people, by the people, for the people. In fact, I found out later that my commissioners were, when they go to those speeches, they would take bets on how many times I mentioned Lincoln in my comments. But hey, Ottawa was the site of the first Lincoln-Douglas debate.
Well, that's where I wanted to end this, with a Paul Simon story. Tell us about Paul Simon coming to Ottawa to talk, to commemorate, I think, the opening of a park commemorating one of the Lincoln-Douglas debates.
Well, it was the first debate here in Ottawa in 1858. And we never really had properly, I didn't think, marked the spot in a meaningful way. That we had a big boulder, supposedly, where the stage was when Lincoln and Douglas were here. But actually, before I became mayor, we started working on, I was with a group that started working on a proper Lincoln-Douglas debate memorial in the park, which involved heroic size bronze statues of Lincoln and Douglas, and a big fountain area with 16 shoots of water coming up, and it's absolutely beautiful. And the project was completed in 2002, a year after 9/11. And we had an incredible unveiling, and we were trying to figure out who should be the main speaker. And Paul Simon came to mind. We called Senator Simon, and he said, "If you can get me to Ottawa, I'd be happy to." We found somebody had a private plane. We picked him up. I think he came with his granddaughter, if I'm not mistaken. And he spoke. We unveiled the statues, all of that, and the high school band was there. It was a great event. The park was full, and he spoke probably about 25, 30 minutes, extemporaneously, not a note, about Lincoln in Ottawa. And of course, Paul Simon, it seemed like he knew half of the people in the crowd. He was, greeting them by name, and he talked about the history. And I remember he mentioned the Know Nothings, and he said, "Mr. Mayor, Eschbach, that's a German name. You're Catholic. You've probably never been mayor back in those days because of the anti-Catholic sentiment and so forth." But it was just amazing. And he, I always was a fan of his from a distance, but it was really wonderful to sit next to him and to hear him speak for that time at that time. One other little story about the Lincoln Douglas Memorial, though, is that the statues were scheduled to be delivered on September 9th of 2002. And we got a call that day saying, we got a problem. We're going to have to delay it a couple of days. So they came September 11th on the first anniversary of 9/11. And we had these big cranes putting the statues in place. And as the second statue was put in place, all of a sudden, this fourth grade class from St. Patrick's grade school comes walking into the park. I got teared up just thinking about it. And I was like, oh my God, it's working. This is what it's all about. They get it. And kudos to that teacher for, not only the fact that there's a Lincoln story, but this was a pretty historic event, the statues going up at that time. And then, of course, it was shortly thereafter that's Paul Simon paid that visit to Ottawa. That might have been his last visit to Ottawa. I'm not sure, but a great man. And I'm very honored to have, being awarded any kind of award associated with his name, and obviously with the Paul Simon Policy Institute. It's been impressive. And then I don't know if it's affected me. I know a lot of people have, congratulated me and whatever. And I didn't realize until yesterday that people were going to be listening to us today. I thought we were just having a little chit chat that you were going to use for the future purposes. But yeah, it's fun, and I like to do what I can, and I'll continue to do that locally. And I've been involved in some other things too at the state level. But it's fun, and government is fun. I think that's what people have. And coming to these meetings is fun. They can be long and convoluted sometimes, but you're part of the story, and enjoy it. Come and enjoy it.
Beats playing a video game, huh?
Yeah.
Well, Bob, I just want to say Governor Edgar and I both think that you're a wonderful recipient of the award, and hopefully can get someone else this coming year as deserving as you were last year. So we look forward to keeping in touch, and thank you again for this for your great work and also this great conversation. And my wife and I are determined to get to Ottawa this spring. And we'd hoped to get there in the fall, and we kind of lost control of our schedule. So I passed through Ottawa some years ago, but I really want to spend a full afternoon there. And
you'll
look at those nice restaurants.
We get the tour and we'll have a great meal.
That would be great.
Okay.
Well, Bob, thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. And thanks to all you for watching this special conversation. Again, as I mentioned, the Simon-Edgar Award will be the 2025 award will be announced in August at the event of the Edgar Fellows, and we'll be taking nominations from April 1 till June 1. So we will be speaking more about that. So again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening to Bob, and thank you for supporting the Institute, keeping the memory of Paul Simon alive and well. Thanks so much.